Okay, so what did you guys come up with as far as your activity matrix? What was your goal?
I mean, our goal is to have Quan share his favorite toys during more of that center free play opportunities in his day. So we focused on when he's outside in free play to really maybe preface it with a social story about what that's going to look like, pairing it with visual and verbal cues, and then kind of practicing and helping him model that strategy in a more structured environment first, and then hopefully transferring that to his free play when he's outside to make those choices.
Okay. And is there any way to work on that? Then can they transfer that to home then? You think?
I mean, I probably think that they could transfer it home, just depending on what his home structure looks like. Does he have opportunities to go out and play with other kids in the neighborhood or something like that?
Right.
And build in a social story into what does that look like when we're playing with the neighborhood kids.
Right. Right. And so if we look back here, let's look at this one. So if we think about this activity matrix for this individual child and the seeking attention, turn taking, and putting on coat. So here is the activity matrix for them at school. So what might that look like for home to work on those three? What could the activities be at home?
Those three things?
Seeks attention, turn taking, and putting on coat.
You could have turn taking even if it's like 3 times play with parents, like about 4 times, I guess. Even if there's not other kids around. Games, games, those sorts of things.
Or then putting on your coat, you can even do it as like turn taking, put those two together. Like I'll help you with putting in one arm, now you do the second arm. Okay, let's take turn. Now it's mommy's turn to help you with putting this in there, and it's your turn to zip it up. That back and forth of kind of putting those two things together, and you're also getting attention too.
Right. Okay. Any questions you had as you developed your activity matrix, or did it seem like it flowed together nicely with the goal you had written?
I think it takes a lot of proactive work in that planning piece to make sure that you are thinking about all the different kinds of strategies you want to incorporate into that teaching.
But just to even plan out the matrix as step 1, when you got good at that, it could, probably flow pretty easily in the planning process. So next, let's talk about how to teach. So you alluded to some of that when you guys were thinking about, well, if we embed it here, here's how we can teach that skill. So now we're going to go through and talk about that. So implementing. So the team decides on the supports and materials needed to teach the child, as well as the reinforcement schedule. So here are some instructional procedures, and you can refer to handout 12.2. So somewhere around, it's going to be right after that example of the activity matrix. So the handout is going to describe the antecedent, behavior, and consequence to complete a learning trial more in depth. But if we just look at this graphic, and we look at where we have most adult-directed, what that looks like, so feedback and consequence strategies, prompt fading strategies. Here's where we're working on some the student work, you're working away from the most adult-directed, so you have some embedded learning opportunities, intentional teaching strategies, and really looking at when we're incorporating and we have the least adult-directed. So we're looking at our supportive environment and universal curriculum modifications. So really thinking about that continuum of supports and prompts that you're putting in place in order to instruct and teach those skills. So, these aren't new to us, we think about these a lot. So the curriculum, modifications, and adaptations. Who would read that list for us?
Environmental arrangements, special equipment, materials modification, simplify the activity, child preferences, invisible support, peer support, adult support.
Okay, so let's go through each one of those, and I'll just ask you all to provide some examples that you can think of for each one of these. So if we think about our environmental arrangement, what are some examples of that?
Like in EC, having the different, like, here's the computer area, and here's the dramatic play area, and science. So that it kind of flows into different social emotional skills and sports.
Okay, and what's the importance of that? Why do we say back in the session where you all got to develop your dream center? What was the importance? What were you thinking through as you designed each of those spaces?
Thinking what kind of skills need to be taught and what kind of activity or space would best lend itself to developing those skills. I think we were also thinking about things that would keep the student engaged,
Right.
students engagement, and then of course the safety issues, so that line of sight piece I think went to a lot of that thing. And I think also exposure to the world,
Okay.
those experiences and vocabulary.
And back to that, like, natural opportunities, when you have all those different areas, it's easier to generalize into play on the playground, or when you're cooking with mom and dad, or whatever it is.
And so, yeah, you all touched on that. So that participation, engagement, and learning, along with just across skills. So, so what about a special equipment? Some examples of special equipment you might need to consider.
Different types of feeding,
Okay.
different types of utensils like left-handed scissors or full grip scissors, staff pencils.
Or really simply, just like the clips that a lot of EC teachers use for, like, now I'm in this center, now I'm in that center. Like, it's a little thing, but it helps with a lot of those turn-taking skills and whatnot.
I think the visuals too.
Yeah.
So again, just about increasing access and participation for students by having that. So what about materials modification? What do you think about for that?
It's probably more things I was talking about.
Like the visual schedule and just.
And I think if somebody had like a visual impairment, maybe making some of those visuals bigger for them to see, or maybe make sure that it's black type on white background, so the distinction's a little bit easier.
It's hard for ECs, it seems like everything's so universal anyway. I mean, as one who doesn't work with EC, you probably have more examples, but so it's easier for all the kids for you.
Well, I think of a lot of this as just UDL strategies, like that's what we think of in ours, but universal design, right, for learning. I mean, that's really what all of this is. So, and then simplifying the activity. So, what's an example that you can think of if you would simplify an activity?
It's writing their name independently, maybe it's using a visual model for them, or it could be using dots or something like that, so they have that, that simplifying that activity. If you wanted to write their name independently and they're not there yet, or the first letter of their name independently, and
Right.
the rest,
Right.
you provide the visual prompt for.
Right. So really just breaking down that task and ensuring success for the child. Okay. And then, of course, child preferences. We always want to be sure that we have things that students are interested in and engaged in. What about invisible support? What do you think that is?
I wondered about that. I don't know.
Do you have an example, Lisa, of invisible support that you guys might
Well,
incorporate?
I'm thinking so many of these visuals that we're talking about, they're in the environment and they're there for anybody to access, but they're really targeted for the kids that need like a individual schedule or those sorts of things. It's not. It's part of the environment. It's just a regular part of the environment.
Mhm. So yeah, just anything, so like the use of songs or movement or any of those things kind of as we think about those rituals and routines. Once you teach them, they're just kind of that invisible support within your classroom.
We allow for a lot of fidget toys too, that maybe just come out at circle time or something. There's a box of fidget toys for the kids that need them, and they're taught, what they're for.
So
But
would it
just
be
to
like, if you were teaching letters or whatever, and you use the book, and then once you're finished with the lesson, the book is there where the kids can always go back and look through it. Would that be considered like a musical
You're good. It's just intended to be part of the environment.
And then of course peer support, so utilizing peers to help within the classroom. So the peers can model, you can pair, a student with a peer, use praise and encouragement. I think that's one thing I don't see us using enough of, is that peer support. Especially when we think about, we're always wondering, well, how do we enrich those students who, are always done first or always, and so having them help a peer and maybe, giving more direction or, just really helping them generalize their skills more too. And building that sense of community. And of course, as we're all aware of, that adult support. So next we're going to talk about complete trial learning. So complete trial learning is a logically occurring or planned antecedent, which is followed by a behavior that then leads logically to a logically occurring or planned consequence. So it's really 3 parts that always need to, and I know we think about this in terms of behavior and when we're doing an FBA, but like to think about this in terms of learning. So really, you have your 3 parts. So I brought some colored paper clips here. So if you have your antecedent, your behavior, and your consequence, they're not as effective if you just have them all 3. If you just have 2 of them together, they're still not very effective. But if you think about that learning trial with all 3 parts, so your antecedent, your behavior, and your consequence, it's really a way to teach skills in a very intentional manner. And so we really want to think about how we can use this to teach skills for our kids. So can you think of an example of when you might use a complete learning trial?
Well, we've got students on behavior charts all over the place. That, it's kind of an if when. So, a little different than that,
Okay. So maybe a behavior goal or a specific skill within that.
he can use this, and then it'll be your turn next, so setting him up for success, so that he first, Quan gets to use it first. So the consequence is he gets a reward out of it, and then he next gets to see that the other kid gets to use it,
And even with that, the antecedent could be that Quan's asking, can I have it? The peer's been prompted, when he
Right,
asks, you're gonna give it to him.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So when we think about any instruction that we want to, any instructional procedures that we're using, you know, all those things we talked about before, curricular modifications, environmental arrangements, specific instructional strategies, again, are all more effective if you have all three components. And so it's really, I think, thinking different about instruction and ensuring that we have all of those. So, and a complete learning trial can occur in a logically occurring or planned. So it can be part of what's just already going on in the environment, or you can specifically plan it. So in the case you mentioned for Quan, Emily, would that be something that was already occurring and so you would set it up, or would you plan specifically for that?
You probably need to plan for it in the beginning, so he has time to practice and be set up to be successful, and then you want it to be more of those natural opportunities.
Right. Does that make sense? Is that something that, like Candace, if you think about what you did in the East, I'm always putting you on the spot, sorry, you are. You know, as an ECE teacher, can you think of some examples that you may have used or done, used a complete learning trial in?
I mean, I think just this, again, like I was saying, just providing just like actual support for kids that we really need, you know, that consistent practice and really getting attention about whatever the skill that could be transferred throughout the day, but that would be really high level. So just like, yeah, like a lot of them would be, you know, the child is really needing my attention, but pulling on my shirt to get my attention, you know, or poking a friend, you know,
Right.
so just really understanding, well, okay, if the child is needing attention, then what's that skill that can be provided, so that way, rather than pulling on a shirt or poking a friend, you know, say, excuse me, or Miss Henry, listen, or such and such. So, yeah, I think just overall, just being really, really clear about the child is demonstrating this behavior because there's a need, and now how do I fulfill that need?
Right, so in your example, it would be your antecedent is the child needs to get your attention, so we'll
Right.
just focus, so that's the antecedent, like
Right.
they need your help for something.
Right.
And so the target behavior you're looking for is raise your hand to get my attention.
Some sort of
Yeah.
replacement behavior.
And then teaching the child that if he does that, then I come right away and give him, that's your consequence.
Right, and then reinforcing, like you had mentioned too, just when the child demonstrates that desired behavior. I mean, you know, like
Right.
I would overly celebrate.
Right.
Like, you know,
Right.
like really make it a
Right.
big deal.
Right. Thank you for raising your hand to get my attention, yeah?
And I almost wonder, does this kind of go into what you were talking about earlier about, like, when are we talking about the teaching part of it? Like, with this, you have to be so intentional about that, right? So, this is part of that, teaching it.
Right.
So here's some more examples. And so we have two different kids here. So in this first example, the antecedent is sitting in circle time. Teacher selects Tommy as the kid counter. Teacher says, let's count your friends. So the target behavior they're looking for is that he touches each friend with a gentle hand or wand and counts using one-to-one correspondence. And the consequence for doing that is that he gets praise